The thing that should not be. They say writing about a traumatic event helps. My therapist told me I just needed to get it out as complete and detailed as I could. She said it would make everything better. I pray she's right. My name is Luis Costas. I live in Minneapolis, where I worked in sanitation. I'm not a bigwig foreman or anything like that. I drive a truck once a week and help out at recycling when I'm not doing that. It wasn't a nice suit and tie job, but it paid well, and I was happy. My wife didn't complain, not even about the smell, and my kids didn't either, especially when I found a toy or something in good condition someone had thrown away. It wasn't a bad life at all despite the occasional crazy shit, like the time we found that alien gun and spent half a day being interrogated by some government suits and poked and prodded by some fancy scientist types. I would say it was a near-perfect job and life. Then came the day, it came to town. I was on my route about half an hour before lunch when I heard the sirens go off. All our smart comms ranged about 30 seconds later with a text from the Meta-American Government Institute Emergency Alert Services. Brutus sighted in the Minneapolis area, please seek shelter. I looked at my partner Benny who was riding shotgun. I've never seen a black man turn so pale. Lou, we gotta roll, he said as he tried to call his house. No answer. I tried my house, then my wife, but the lines were busy. It seemed everyone was calling in the area, and the service had crashed. I turned on the truck's comm service, and a woman's voice, slightly electronic, spoke, the Meta being Brutus sighted in the Minneapolis area, please seek shelter, and lock your doors. Law enforcement and military forces have been mobilized. I gunned the engine and instinctively headed toward my neighborhood. My kids' school was a few minutes from my house, and it had a shelter. My wife would go there if she had time. It was part of our family's plan. Everyone had one, for days like this, just in case. Benny kept trying his phone and dialing up new internet channels on the comm. It was the same voice over and over, giving more details. Brutus was moving from north to south and was last seen in the downtown area. We both looked left as we came over a hill towards tall buildings that marked our city center. Black smoke bellowed up between buildings, and helicopters and camera drones flew in the air above. As we looked on, something about the size of a car flew up and through one helicopter. After that came a roar that was primal and animalistic that rattled the windows. My head then turned back to the road just in time to see a wreck at the intersection. I hit the brakes. Behind me, other cars stopped. I honked my horn twice. The wreck seemed new. The safety foam that replaced the old airbags hadn't even fully dissolved. I looked for a way around, but more cars had driven up and stopped, and another accident had blocked traffic behind me. The siren got louder. We have to go, man. Lou opened the door and leaped out. I followed, grabbing the rosary off the rearview monitor as I did. People milled about looking in the air, towards downtown or at the wreck. Slightly calmer, we moved towards the crowded intersection from the street to the sidewalk just as a shadow crossed over us. Looking up, I saw a military helicopter was heading towards us, its body twisted. Instinctively we ran and leaped back under our truck just as it hit a shopping center on the other side of the intersection. After the sound of the crash came the roar I had heard earlier, but this time closer and louder. Scrambling back to our feet from under the truck, I heard a few screams and started to run. A guy about 20 or so I passed had his smart comm out taking pictures, and I heard him say, YouTube, just as his attention turned from the helicopter crash to something in the sky. I looked up. It was a dot at first, getting bigger as it fell. At first, I thought it was a car, but then as it grew closer, I could see it was something else. I went to Mass once a week, not because I was religious. Yes, I was raised that way, but not in the way my wife was. I never put much stock into the concept of there being a devil, at least not a guy in a red suit carrying a pitchfork. However, as I felt my inner leg go warm and wet, I became a believer. There it was, over 9 feet tall, as wide as the front of my truck, with red fur, blade-like spikes on its shoulders and arms, a monstrous twisted face, curled horns, long tail. Kids called it the All-Beast one because some fucking band named Steak made a song about it with that name as the title. Nothing can stop the terror, the unknowable terror, it went. Some just called it the ABO. But officially, it was Brutus. Today, for me at least, it was the devil himself. I stood in fear, unable to move, everything seemed to slow down. With all my will, I told myself to run. The creature roared again and grabbed a man who was pinned under a piece of pavement at his feet, pulling most of the body clear before taking a big bite of him. "Fucking run," I called out, coming to my senses and heading down the street as fast as I could. This is how a gazelle must feel when a lion attacks. All I could think was move and live, stay and die. More screams, behind a deep growl, a guttural laugh. Looking up, 2 of the new Air Force electro-turbine fighter planes flew low. I could see their missiles fire. This was it, I thought, as I kissed the crucifix and waited for the end. The pressure wave hit me, followed by heat. Down the street, I went, the world spinning and turning dark. The sound of my comm woke me. I looked up to see dust in the air, coughed up bloody mud, and opened my eyes to see I was in what was left of a circus burger. I had glass shards in my arm and legs. I was thrown through a window, my ribs ached, and my left eye was blurry. I looked at the smartcomm for almost a minute as it rang till I realized it was my wife. "Louise," I heard her call out. "Honey," I called back, my chest hurting with each breath. "It's here," she said, crying before the connection went dead. My heart almost stopped. In the background, I heard a muffled roar. Quickly I came to my feet, ignored the pain, and ran. It took me less than a minute to get my bearings. I was about 10 minutes away from my house by car. Storm clouds were moving in, and the streets were full of dust. I could hear police and fire engine sirens getting closer, but I couldn't wait, I had to go. Half limping, half running, I moved past the dead and dying bodies, past people who were calling out for God's help in the streets, past the wreckage of 2 electro-turbine fighter planes. I heard thunder in the distance but ignored it like I ignored the pain as my surroundings became more familiar. In front of me, I could hear screams and see smoke. "Louise," a familiar voice. An old gas-powered pickup truck full of young men I knew. All street toughs who were more talk than action, stopped near me. "You know him, S.A., said one. "Yeah, he's cool. He gave me an old bike I fixed up as a kid," said another. 2 young men exited out of the truck bed. The one I recognized was Tomas. He looked concerned. "You look like shit," he said. "I gotta get home," I said. "Come on, man," he grabbed my arm and steadied me. The other boy helped, and together they half-dragged me to the truck. It was full of new hollow-screen comm systems. I saw one of the boys carrying a new rail shotgun, the other one, an old revolver. Tomas argued with the driver for a few seconds, then joined me. "Gonna drop you off, man," he said, "but after that, we have to roll, the heroes are coming." It was starting to rain as we drove on the street and sidewalks. The dust was clearing. I could smell something burning when suddenly the truck's motor went dead. I tried to stand, and Thomas helped. Someone said their comm had stopped, and another one said the same thing. Ahead of us was what remained of my children's school. The walls of the building collapsed and blood-stained. A cement truck was halfway out of some of the rubble, and I heard the roar again. As I looked, the monster that killed my world came from the rubble, its fur matted in gore and blood. The half-dozen boys that talked tough screamed and ran. Only Tomas stood his ground, and I could see he did so only out of fear. "No, God, no," I mumbled as Brutus looked in our direction. Yeehaw! A motorcycle came from behind us, popped a wheelie, jumped onto the bed of the truck past me, and sent Tomas and me into the air. The passenger was wearing a blue and black bodysuit, a red half poncho and a leather cowboy hat. He was firing 2 guns as he went through the air, and I could swear he was smiling. "You look hungry, Haas," he said, leaping off the motorcycle in mid-flight almost faster than I could follow. "How about a 10mm railed gun sandwich with a side of Hydrox B?" he added as he literally landed on the monster's head and stuck a grenade in its mouth. A second later, Brutus roared as his lower jaw was blown half off by the explosion. "The Marauders," said Tomas slowly with awe and fear. I nodded. They were vigilantes out of Chicago and were the nearest pantheon to our city and, from what I heard, one of the best in the world. The cowboy flipped and dodged from its attacker's blows, shooting as he did. I could tell the fancy guns he carried were doing little damage, and the damage from the grenade that went off in his mouth was almost healed. A wave of wind and a sonic boom almost floored me as orange and purple blurs ran past us. The cowboy jumped free as the blur moved around the creature, leaving tiny cuts. The blur, like its friend, was more of a distraction than anything, so when it broke to run and slowed down enough for me to see that it was a short and stocky young man with lavender skin, I knew that was their plan. Brutus followed, leaving the school grounds and moving ape-like on all fours towards us at breakneck speed. Thomas grabbed me and dragged me to the cover behind a nearby downed tree. "We're fucked," he called out as he caught his breath. I think I nodded and looked from behind where we hid. Just in time to see the creature land on the truck we just jumped free of. "Tag, you're it, motherfucker," from down the ruined street, another young man. This one had a black and gray outfit with tiger stripe accents. Quickly and precisely, he rammed his hand like knives into the devil's shoulder, and blood exploded into the air. He then slipped between the monster's legs and onto his back, cutting with his hands and dodging the monster's tail. The creature screamed in pain just as the vigilante leaped free. "He's all yours, big man, bring the wood," he called out, landing near us. As I rose to see what was about to happen, he turned and tackled Tomas and me to the ground. "Down," he said as something fell from the sky. The downed tree flew over us as the ground exploded outward. The dark-skinned hero with hands that could damage anything grabbed us in mid-freefall and moved us as if we weighed less than nothing, leaped between the flying rubble, landing us softly about a block away. "Stay down," he said before running back into the dust cloud towards the fight, leaving us in the parking lot of a half-level taqueria. The dust cleared as the sound of metal against unbreakable flesh and bone almost deafened me. Brutus was staggering back. In front of him was a 7-foot-tall man made of gold wearing green and black bibbed overalls facing him without an ounce of fear on his face. Brutus' claws flew at his chest, tearing his clothing and sending sparks into the air. From the air, bolts of lightning rained down on the monster, guided by a man in blue, white, and gold. He glided on the wind current shouting orders with a voice that sounded like thunder. "We got the son of a bitch on the ropes," he said. "Let's put him down." He flew higher and raised his hands, summoning a tornado from the clouds that landed on his teammate and the thing he fought. The man of gold dug his hands into the ground and braced himself. Brutus flew upward into the vortex before being tossed free, spinning. What happened next happened so fast that I'm not sure I saw it at all. A blue wave of energy caused the air ahead of it to ripple and tore into the monster in mid-flight. A muscular blonde man in blue and white flew in closer and fired another blue blast before grabbing the disoriented abomination and tossing it into the air. A man in black and yellow then flew up after him, getting closer and glowing brighter and brighter as he did. As they became little more than dots above our heads, the glowing hero unleashed an explosion that parted the clouds above. My good, I went white then dark, and I fell back as a rush of wind from above knocked me down. Unable to breathe, I finally succumbed to all my injuries. Dreaming, I awoke to see my wife and kids walking with me in a large green field. I was content, and I could feel love all around me. As I started to speak to my family, I saw them pull away from me as I fell away back into a world of sirens and pain. "I think he's back with us," a woman's voice with a strange accent, German or Russian, leaned over me, holding one of those new hand-held delibrators to my chest. She had red hair and was wearing a red and green tight fighting uniform. "You'll be fine," she said, not with her voice but directly into my head. My mind raced from my pain to my family. She smiled. "We'll find them," she said, this time out loud. The lavender-skinned man, who was, to my surprise, was shorter than I expected, vanished in a blur away from me after giving me a quick thumbs up. I tried to move, but my right leg was in a fast cast, and drying first aid spray covered injuries all over my body. My left eye was covered, and my uncovered right one was still full of bright dots and blurs. "Over here," the woman spoke aloud and motioned paramedics my way. Quickly, I was examined, placed on a board, and tagged stable. Around me, the remains of my neighborhood and injured, traumatized people walking about in a haze of horror. "My family," I mumbled, spitting out a tooth and blood. A nearby EMT noticed me and ran to my side, and held me down as I tried to roll off my board and stand. Quickly he slapped a tranq patch on my bare chest, and I watched the world blur and fade away again. They found my wife, dead in the school wreckage, crushed. They said she died quickly. My son, the eldest of my children, was found cuddling my daughter in the school basement shelter. He lost a leg, and she had her spine crushed. My insurance covered both his new Imagi-Tech new limb and her spine reconstruction. They even covered the swipe of their memories. I didn't want them to remember what happened that day, all their dead classmates, teachers, and mother. Me, I could have had it done too, but I wanted to remember. I had to. It was my cross to carry. In fact, it was only after Benny, thank God he lived, complained about the new driver he was assigned for the 100th time while I was on disability that I went in for one of those new robot eyes to replace my left one. Thomas lost his family, too. As I said, he was mostly a good kid, so I let him move in with us. And I even got him a job driving a garbage truck like mine. He complains about how hard it is when he isn't bragging to me about all the cool things he's found on his route. My therapist may have been right. This did help. I can see I did my best, and I see I have a lot to live for. Still, I now fear sleep because when it comes, and I dream, nothing can stop the terror, the unknowable terror.